All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Alex once again with the EOT Newsflash, and welcome back to our Core 2020 Limited Set Review. We are on to the red cards tonight. We're going to burn people out and beat them down just as fast. So, if you haven't watched one of these videos before, we are operating on a 4-point scale. Ones are the cards that you will never play because they are trash. Twos are your more generic cards. They'll be mostly what your deck is comprised of. 3 is going to be your more premium spells, creatures and removal, and the like. And 4s are the absolute bombs in a color that will pull you into a color. You open your first pack and draft, you pick the card, that's your texture of your deck. It's going to be in your seal pool. It basically makes your deck. It's always powerful and is great at winning games. We also have our sideboard cards, will be represented by an S, and the Build Around Me cards, which are represented by a B, which really need to have a deck built around them to be at their most efficient. And the sideboard cards are ones that you would bring in if your opponent presents you with a card that would typically not be able to be dealt with by normal deck construction. So it's something like maybe an enchantment, a planeswalker, or a very specific kind of card. So without any further ado, let's not waste any time and get on with our first red card, an Act of Treason. 2 and a red sorcery at common, gains control of target creature until the end of turn, untaps it, and it gains haste. No other frills. The only downside to this one here is that there's no free sack outlets in this set, which is pretty typical of core sets. So this is really only at home in a very aggressive red-based deck that can just wants to steal one last creature and get in those last 2 points of damage. 1.75, nothing too fancy. On the other hand, we have Cavalier of Flame, 2 red, Elemental Knight, Mythic Rare, 6/5. You can pay 1 and a red and give creatures you control +1/+0 until the end of turn, and they gain haste. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may discard any number of cards and then draw that many cards. When it dies, it deals X damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard and scene. Whew. That's a lot of text. This is an incredibly powerful card here. The turn that you play this probably won't be doing a whole lot of damage, but the next turn, to have that kind of fire breathing for your whole team is just insane. The draw effect on it, while powerful, I have to question in a game of limited on turn 5 how many, if you're playing this on curve, how many cards do you have to go along with this to discard and draw up to? And I would basically say that last ability on there, where it's talking about lands, is basically irrelevant. Possibly if it's late enough in the game and you draw a bunch of lands and you can just get rid of them, maybe so, but even then, this card is just still ridiculously powerful. It's a 2.75 for me. Very, very cool stuff. Next up, we have got the first of our 3 red planeswalkers. This is Chandra. If I can get it up on the screen completely. There we go. Acolyte of Flame. 1 red, legendary planeswalker Chandra, rare, 4-starting loyalty. For her first 0 ability, put a loyalty counter on each red planeswalker you control. Her second 0 ability creates 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. They gain haste, and you sacrifice them at the end of the next instep. And for -2, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with a converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard. And if you do, it would be put it into exile instead. So all the Chandras have a pretty specific deck they want to go into. She is at her best in a very spell-heavy deck. Also, the elementals she makes are also pretty relevant because this is a very elemental-heavy core set, interestingly enough. The plus, her first 0 ability is basically her only plus. The likelihood of you having multiple red planeswalkers in your limited deck, pretty unlikely. You may get the uncommon one to go along with her, but wouldn't bet on that. But she still is quite powerful, and I gave her a 2.25 with a bit of a build around me to go along with it. And then we have this one. This is Chandra Awakened Inferno. 4 red, legendary planeswalker Chandra, mythic rare, 6 starting loyalty. She cannot be countered. +2, each opponent gets an emblem with at the beginning of your upkeep. This emblem deals 1 damage to you. Jeez. -3, Chandra Awakened Inferno deals 3 damage to each non-elemental creature, and her -X allows her to deal X damage to target creature or planeswalker, and if a permanent would be dealt damage this way, that would die this turn, you would exile it instead. So Chandra is this Chandra is absolutely absurd. The removal aspect of her on her -3 and -X abilities are just absolutely ridiculous. The +2 ability is where it really gets scary, though. To just play this on 6, plus it once, and just say you are now on a clock. You need to deal with Chandra this very turn. Going to 8 loyalty, unless it's killed on the next turn, you just plus it again, and then it's 2 damage a turn. Like this is catastrophically powerful to untap with Chandra in play. This is probably going to cause some problems in Standard if she sees play. Just throwing that out there right now. This could cause some problems, but she's very, very, very powerful here. 2.75 for me. I would rank her just a bit higher if only she didn't come down so late in the game where that +2 ability really might not make all the difference. But for the rest of her, she's very powerful indeed. Next up, we've got Chandra Novice Pyromancer. 3 in a red for a legendary Planeswalker Chandra at uncommon. This is Chandra at the beginning of her Planeswalking career. 5 starting loyalty, +1 lets you give elementals you control +2/+0 till the end of turn. -1 lets you add 2 red mana with no restriction on what you're casting. And -2, she deals 2 damage to any target. I actually like her quite a bit more than her rare Acolyte of Flame version, just because there are so many elementals in this set. And God forbid if you have both Acolyte and Novice, those elementals are huge. I do like a good mana production power on her as well, and the ability to shock anything is also quite relevant. An Anthem, a mana boost and removal, solid Planeswalker, 2.5 for me. Next up, we've got Chandra's Ember Kitty Cat. 1 in a red for an elemental cat, common. Tap it to add 1 red mana that you can only spend to cast an elemental spell or a Chandra Planeswalker spell. It's also a 2/2. At best, this is really at its most powerful in a elemental deck. We have elementals in blue, green, and red for this set, so there's a lot of play for the Fire Cat here. So it's a good bit of acceleration there as well. Just a decent beater as well. Solid bear with some upside. Solid 2 here for me. Next up, we've got more Chandra cards. We have Chandra's Outrage. 2 and 2 red instant at common. Deals 4 damage to target creature and 2 damage to that creature's controller. This is a very, very powerful spell here indeed. It's a 2.5 for me. This will kill most creatures in this set, and a nice little shock to the face is definitely worth it as well. Being at instant speed makes this a premier spell for your red decks. Very good stuff here indeed. And next up, we have her Regulator. I don't know why she's getting... she's the core of the set. Ha! Core set. Get it? Stop. All right, Chandra's Regulator. 1 in a red legendary artifact at rare. Whenever you activate a loyalty ability of a Chandra Planeswalker, you may pay 1, and if you do, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for that copy. You can pay 1 and tap it and discard a mountain or a red card to draw a card. I would basically ignore that first line of text, unless I'm playing this in Standard in some sort of Chandra Super Friends deck thing. The ability to just discard excess mountains, excess red cards, in the late game to draw extra cards is pretty powerful here. I don't know how good it's going to actually be. It's a solid 2.25 for me. Anytime that I see red getting the ability to draw cards, definitely have to pay some attention to it. The investment and the restriction on it might be a bit too high, but I'll definitely want to see this one in play before I make a final judgment on it. But 2.25 to start with. And then we have her Spitfire. I swear this is her last card in the set. 2 in a red for an elemental uncommon 1/3 flying, and whenever an opponent is dealt damage or non-combat damage, Chandra's Spitfire gets +3/+0 till the end of turn. So burn effects are what we are looking at for here. Unfortunately, there just aren't a lot of good ways to actually do that in this set, and just being a 1/3 flyer isn't all that much exciting either. But if you do have any number of elementals in your deck as well, there might be some play to this, but beyond that, it's a 1.75 for me. Not terribly exciting. And next up, we have the Dagger Sail Aeronaut. 3 in a red for a goblin at common, 3/2, which as long as it's your turn, he has flying. Coming down is the best part. The stats aren't embarrassing. Flat out, that's really what I'm looking at here. The ability to have it give it flying is also pretty clever, especially out of a red deck, which are traditionally far more ground-based. This is not embarrassing. It's a 1.75 for me. I don't think it's, it's a good curve filler at best, and that's about it. Moving right along, we've got Destructive Digger. 2 in a red for a goblin common at 3/2. You can pay 3 and tap it, sacrifice an artifact or land, and draw a card. This is pretty interesting stuff right here, especially for limited, to give red basically more restrictive card draw. And it's kind of a cool flavor as well. Again, like the Dagger Sail, the stats are decent, but having to tack on a 3-mana activated ability and then also sacrificing lands or artifacts to draw those cards, bit of a high bar to cross there. But, in a game where you've really flooded out, the mitigation on that is quite real here. So 1.75 for me, a lot like the Dagger Sail. Interesting, probably not all that impactful though. And then there's this. Dragon Mage here returning from, I don't remember what core set, but this is an old card here. 5 red, Dragon Wizard. That's right, Dragon Wizard. Where's Niv Mizzet? Where is he? Uncommon, 5/5 flyer, and whenever he deals combat damage to a player, each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. So this is pretty scary stuff to let your opponent reload like that, especially in the late game. It's a full draw 7, not even, only draw cards equal to the number in your hand that you discarded, just draw 7. The upside here is that you are obviously untapping with your guy and attacking with it. That's the first time you can actually hit with it. You would most likely have all the open mana to play those cards that you've drawn. So I'm not sure how powerful this actually is. 7 mana is a ton. But again, you are the one with the untapped mana first, so I can see this being pretty powerful here to have some removal if you're in blue-red, maybe some counter magic or bounce spells to take advantage of whatever your opponent plays off of their fresh hand. So pretty cool stuff here. Definitely a powerful card here. One that I would like to get out a little bit more quickly, with maybe some green enchantments that generate extra mana, or possibly that Chandra who generates mana as well. Or maybe I'd just rather cast this. This is Drakuseth, Maw of Flames. 4 red, legendary creature dragon at rare, 7/7, flying. Whenever it deals damage, whenever it attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to and 3 damage to each of up to 2 other targets. Holy crap! This is dealing so much damage. Like, this is 10 extra damage. Like, 17 damage coming off of this thing to multiple targets. Wow. The only downside to this card is that triple red here. But as we've already mentioned, with Dragon Mage, there are some ways to accelerate this out relatively quickly. God forbid you reanimate this thing out of black-red. That's pretty scary too. I gave this thing a 3.25. I think it is quite powerful. And aside from that triple red cost, this will completely devastate a battlefield if left unchecked. Super powerful. And next up, we've got a little Ember Hauler. Not all Goblin Army jobs are glamorous. Red, Goblin Uncommon, 2/2, pay 1, sacrifice it, and it deals 2 damage to any target. I like this guy quite a bit, actually. He's great in a red aggressive deck, and has a little bit of removal as an insurance policy. Powerful stuff here. 2.25, pretty simple stuff. And finally, when I saw this card was in this set, I got a little giddy, because Fire Elemental here has been in literally every core set forever. And it's always terrible, because it's just a 5-mana 5/4. But we're in the Elemental core set with Chandra, so it's a little bit better, I guess. Yeah, it's a 5-mana 5/4. There's not a lot of there's really nothing to it other than the cards that actually care about other elementals. So there's some play there. I gave it a 2 just because I think you might have something to do with it this time around, other than just attack for 5. It's not embarrassing. And next up, we have got ourselves a little Flame Sweep. 2 in a red. Come on, get that centered up. 2 in a red, instant Instant board wipe here, actually. Uncommon, it deals 2 damage to each creature except for creatures you control with flying. This is seriously powerful stuff here. At best, in a blue-red elemental deck with some of the elemental flyers in blue, I think. And when you're firing this off, you're more than likely the one who has engineered the board state that this will make the most impact possible. So a card like this, I think, is actually quite good. Bit of a build around me, but when you do fire it off, it is quite powerful. So powerful that I gave it a 2.25. And next up, probably the best art in the whole set, we have Fry. 1 in a red instant at uncommon, cannot be countered, deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker that's white or blue. Again, like this is up there with Rending Volley was the other one that was like the savior of Modern from Splinter Twin. Yeah, get out of here. They still had to ban it. Still bitter. Still bitter. But yeah, this is sideboard. If they present you with a blue and white deck, bring it in. Otherwise, leave it alone. Next up, we have the Glinthorn Buccaneer. 1 red Minotaur Pirate at rare is a 2/4 with haste. And whenever you discard a card, deals 1 damage to each opponent. You may pay 1 in a red to discard a card and draw a card. And you activate this ability only if Glinthorn Buccaneer is attacking. So this guy is quite weird, all told. The stats are quite kind of bizarre for a red card especially. And the real drawback is being only able to activate that ability when you're attacking. There are no real other good ways to discard cards outside of this and the Cavalier, which is mythic rare. So it's hard to pull this off, actually. That being said, it's a 2.25 for me. I can see this definitely getting into combat pretty frequently, and having 4 toughness means it's going to be very hard to block in the early game. But unfortunately, it will get outclassed quite quickly. But good card selection. Then we got this little guy. I love this art. Goblin Bird Grabber. 1 in a red, Goblin common 2/1. You can pay a red and it gains flying until the end of turn. You can only activate this ability if you control a creature with flying. So the flavor here is just on point. It's 1.75 for me. It's pretty underwhelming, but in the blue-red elemental deck, because there are a good number of flying elementals in this set that are in blue, this is not embarrassing. And it being a 2-drop for 2 power, you can do worse, but you can do a lot better. And now we've got a card that I'm sure out there that every modern Goblin player is just losing their mind over. Goblin Ring Leader. 3 in a red, Goblin uncommon 2/2 with haste. As it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 4 cards of your library and put all Goblin cards revealed this way into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. I believe this is Legacy Goblin playable. Like, that's how powerful this card is here. And we've had Goblin Matron pre-printed in Modern Horizons. There's a lot of goblins now we can play in Modern, I think. So, is he good in Limited? Not really. There's only 7 goblins in this set, and just, like I said, head to Modern with this guy and be done with it. Moving right along. To another goblin, actually. Goblin Smuggler. 2 in a red, Goblin Rogue at common 2/2 with haste. You can tap him, and another target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. So that's actually pretty cool here. If the game is getting kind of bogged down, there's no really good attacks from either side to be made, this can at least get in and let you get in with something small and possibly pump it up to get through those last few points of damage. So he's not embarrassing. He's a solid 2 and is a solid beater on his own. And next up, we have Infuriate. 1 red gives you an instant at common to give a creature +3/+2 until the end of turn. It's a pretty solid trick here. I just wish it gave a little bit more than just a power toughness boost. And mostly that's because a lot of the red creatures don't have any inherent extra abilities themselves. So I would use this as a good combat trick, but nothing more than that. It's a 1.5 for me. Next up, we've got Keldon Raiders. I forget what set this is from, but this is actually an old card here as well. 2 red, common 4/3 human warrior. As it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card, and if you do, draw a card. So really good stats right from the get-go, and the ability to filter cards out of your deck as well, also quite powerful. Keldon Raider here, solid 2 for me. Very good card, very good curve filler in your deck. Next up, we have Lavakin Brawler. 3 in a red elemental warrior at common is a 2/4, and whenever it attacks, it gets +1/+0 until the end of turn for each elemental you control. So obviously, we've already mentioned that there is an elemental deck, blue, green, and red are the colors for that deck. And he goes, or actually no, Brawler here goes really nicely into any of that deck. It's a great beater, solid stats, and having 4 toughness means it can actually do a little bit of defense as well until you decide to turn her sideways and just obliterate your opponent's life total. Pretty cool stuff. Next up, we have another new Leyline. This is Leyline of Combustion. 2 red enchantment, rare. Does the usual Leyline thing. If it's in your opening hand, put it in play at the beginning of the game. And whenever you and or at least one permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, Leyline of Combustion deals 2 damage to that player. I am not convinced this is main deckable just yet. It might very well could be, but I do need to see it in action first. So I'm going to put this as a sideboard card only to start with. Definitely bring this in against decks that have a lot of removal. Blue-red, black-blue, black-red. Those are the decks you want this against, and it can definitely do a lot of damage, I think, against decks like that. Next up, we've got Maniacal Rage. 1 in a red enchantment aura, common enchants a creature, and that creature gets +2/+2 and can no longer block. This is a card that I'm never big fans of cards like this that really just kind of slot you into one specific game of plan of attack here. Only the most aggressive draft decks will want this. As I'm sure that you've noticed in a lot of your sealed pre-release, it's quite difficult to make a cohesive aggro deck with just the wide swath of cards that you have. So draft hyper-aggressive red decks, put this on those creatures, and pray they don't have Unsummon. Moving on to a very interesting card. This is Marauding Raptor. 1 in a red creature dinosaur at rare, 2/3. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less. Now, that's pretty interesting. But whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Marauding Raptor deals 2 damage to it. If a dinosaur is dealt damage this way, Marauding Raptor gets +2/+0 until the end of turn. Now, granted, there's only I think this and like one other dinosaur, the Regisaur, the black one, and I think there's one more actually. We'll get to here in just a minute. It might not actually be a dinosaur. I can't remember. So this is really weird stuff here. So I gave Marauding up here a build-around ranking here simply because the mana reduction I don't think is enough to make this card playable. The color combinations where this comes together. So like I looked at all the color combinations possible. So like in red-white, everything dies from this shock. In green-red, everything mostly survives, but those creatures are all already giant as is, and it's 1 cheaper to cast. In black and blue, the same thing kind of holds true there. Most red creatures just kind of fall over to this as well. So it's really weird. And obviously this was designed for dinosaurs because of Ixalan here, obviously. So I give it a build around me ranking. I just don't think you're going to be able to get there with it. I'm not for limited. I'm not going there. Next up, we've got Mask of Immolation. 1 in a red for an equipment artifact uncommon. As it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 red elemental creature token, then attach the Mask of Immolation to it. If a creature has sacrificed this creature, it deals 1 damage to any target, and it equips for 2 generic mana. So this is kind of like Mortar Pod here, which I really like Mortar Pod. So I should like this card as well. Well, I don't, because it's equipment and limited. If there was a good token generator in this set, and granted there is one that we'll get to here in just a minute that this could do something with, but for the most part I'm not super high on this. Obviously the elemental synergy is there, but I don't think that this is going to be good enough to really make your decks. Equipment really needs to be high impact for limited to be considerable here. So I put it as a build around me. If you have a bunch of tokens in your deck or a bunch of cheap creatures that are expendable, maybe go for it, but even then I probably wouldn't. Next up, we've got Pack Mastiff. 1 in a red for a hound, common 2/2. Pay 1 in a red, and each creature you control named Pack Mastiff gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. Yet another one of these cares about other cards with this same name as this card, and this one's actually pretty scary as well. It's a solid 2 on its own. As just a 1 of, it's fine. But as again, I'm kind of using 3 as the benchmark for cards like this and its ilk. to be really impactful here, and this becomes a real serious threat. Unfortunately, you're only getting a boost to the power, so it is quite easy to trade with these things. But with enough of these on board, that one activation could be a ton of damage and could easily just completely obliterate the board state for both players. So good stuff here. Solid 2. Next up, we've got Rapacious Dragon. 4 and a red for a dragon, uncommon, 3/3 with flying. And as it enters the battlefield, you create 2 treasures. Apparently we're doing that still in this format. I don't really know what to do with those treasures. I'm looking through the entire set, trying to figure out if there is this sort of hidden 3-color plus deck out there. We saw that with War of the Spark, and while we do have Gift of Paradise in this set, and we do have the common tap gain lands from Khans of Tarkir showing up, and I think it's every like 50% of the times you will find one of those common tap lands in the basic land slot for your deck. So there might be a deck that wants to take advantage of, as many colors as possible. And this does have some play to that, especially if you can blink it and, generate more treasures to have more of a splash color available to you. I need to really digest the set and figure out if that deck actually exists. But that being said, it's a 4-mana 3/3 flyer, or 5-mana 3/3 flyer, which is plenty big here. And it does manage a bit of mana acceleration, so there is that aspect to think of as well. So it's a 2.25. It might be better than I'm giving it credit for, and I really do hope that there is that 5-color deck that exists, because after doing that War of the Spark, I'm kind of in love with the idea. Next up, we have Reckless Airstrike. For a single red, you get a sorcery at common. Choose 1. Deals 3 damage to target creature with flying, or destroy target artifact. This basically only has 1 line of text. So that first part. It's a sideboard card, unfortunately, because, against most decks, you won't have a good target for this. Black-red, there's no targets. Green-red, there's no targets for it. Basically, anything that has blue or white in it, bring it in. So there you go. Next up, we've got Reduce to Ashes. 4 and a red for a sorcery at common. Deals 5 damage to target creature, and if that creature would die to this turn, exile it instead. This checks a majority of the creatures, probably around 85% of the creatures in this set. So that's really good here. The only thing holding this back is the fact that it's sorcery. Other than that, this is a very powerful removal spell, especially in draft if your opening pack is weak. Bad rare, bad uncommons, and this is a great first pick, and I can easily see this going into most mid-range or control red decks, blue-red, black-red, things like that. So pretty good stuff here. Next up, we've got Repeated Reverberation. 2 red instant rare. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell, and your next instant or sorcery, or activate a loyalty ability this turn, copy that spell or ability twice. You may choose new copies for new targets for the copies here. So this is a serious build around me card, because this is a massive investment. Granted, there are a decent number of cheap spells to do with this, but you're going to need something really good to do with this. So maybe like the pump spell, or God forbid you have Reduced to Ashes going with this and you have 9 mana to spend. There are things to do with this, but they're few and far between on what's actually worth doing with it. It's a solid build around me, just because you do need it in a very spell-heavy deck. I wouldn't just throw this into any deck that has the usual 7 or 8 spells for a regular limited deck. Very heavy blue-red control decks will want this. And even then, like I said, I need something really impactful to fire this off to go along with. And moving along, we have, yes, the third dinosaur in the set. I was right. It is a dinosaur. We have Ripscale Predator, 4 red, common dinosaur, 6/5 with menace. This falls into the same camp as what's the thing? It's the Thrall with Death Touch in black here, as sort of like that good top-end beater that you might need to play if you didn't open a bomb, or you just need something to top off the curve and just be a way to end the game if you have to. And this is a pretty good one here. Menace is always good and limited, is going to trade for at least 2 creatures being so big, especially if it comes down any earlier than turn 6, which not common, but can possibly happen if you're in like a green-red deck. This is a pretty good beater here. It's a solid 2.25 for me. Next up, we've got Scampering Scorcher, 3 in a red for an elemental uncommon 1/1 as it enters the battlefield. Create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens, and elementals you control gain haste until the end of turn. So this is the one card that I can see playing with Mask of Immolation, and I'm still not that high on it. I am more than happy to get 3 power with the bodies, or three power with the bodies across 3 bodies here for 4 mana. And, you know, like I said, Mask of Immolation is kind of where I think this card can go. But if you do have a bunch of more elementals in play, this is a great way to sort of just, you know, alpha strike and get through some damage. I just wish it was a little bit stronger. Next up, we've got Scorch Spitter. A single red mana gets you an elemental lizard at common. It's a 1/1, and whenever it attacks, it deals 1 damage to player or planeswalker it is attacking. This is far too small to do anything ever. Only in the most hyper aggressive red decks will want this. The fact that this is an elemental does let it play with the Chandra that wants to anthem for elementals, so there is that. But I need a bunch of these before I consider going all in on this hyper aggressive red deck. It's possible, but I don't like it. And next up, we've got Shock. A single red mana gets you an instant at common to deal 2 damage to any target. Yep. Good stuff. Much like Murder, like this is just bread and butter red mage stuff here. This is going to check a majority of the early game creatures in the format. So you've got things like Murder, Disfigure, Shock, Unsummon. These are like the key removal spells for the colors that you're playing. So this is a great one to have. It's not going to. It might finish the game. It's going to kill off a creature. It's going to kill off, an early game play of theirs. It's good to have. Maybe not too many of them, but you'll always be happy to have this in your red decks. And we've also got something else that I hate seeing in limited play because it always gets me, and I've never been able to get anybody with it. Anyway, this is Tectonic Rift. 3 in a red for a sorcery at common. Destroys target land, which isn't the part that matters. Its creatures without flying can't block this turn. So if the board is stalled out, and you've got all the attacks you need, you just have to get it through, you rift them. And you blow up whatever land you want, and just go for it. This is a Falter effect, is the more traditional name for this ability here. This is always good unlimited. You just have to be able to go wide enough, or have gotten them low enough that when this actually does come up, it's just game over. It's a 1.75. It definitely is a one-shot kind of glass cannon effect here, but when you get to fire this off, you will feel really cool. Next up, we've got Thunderkin Awakener. 1 in a red elemental shaman at rare. It's a 1/2 with haste. Whenever it attacks, you choose target elemental creature in your graveyard with toughness less than its toughness. Return that card to the battlefield tapped and attacking, and you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. I tried to combine attacking and sacrifice, and I got attackerifying. Keyword that one, wizards. So, unfortunately, this is not as cool as I'd like it to be without a little bit of help. Things like, what was it called? Infuriate makes this thing a lot more powerful. But just baseline stats, there's only a handful of elementals this can actually get back with its trigger. But if you can, get sort of like the deck built around me, this can be quite powerful. This probably has some play in an older format like Modern, possibly Standard if there's not elementals. But Limited, I would have to really build around this hard to make it be worth it. And next up, we have Uncaged Fury. 2 in a red for an instant at uncommon. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains double strike until the end of turn. The only thing wrong with this is that it's really easy to read. Your opponent cannot hide this one. As long as you know it exists in this set, having this much mana open up on their turn when they attack, you are walking into this if you block it. Let the damage go through. Who cares? It's still a really good trick, though. Solid 2 for me. I like having this in any aggressive deck I'm playing. And, yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. And our last red card, we have Unchained Berserker. I think we are now, 4 for 4 on, let me double check. 4 for, is that for charge? Yeah, we are 4 for 4 on bad last cards of each color here. This one is easily the best of the bunch, though. I will say that much. Unchained Berserker is a 1 and a red human berserker at uncommon. It's a 1/1 with protection from white. And as long as it's attacking, it gets +2/+0. So that's kind of good. Definitely a sideboard card against white. Can be also a bit of a build around me. Like if you are going for a very aggressive deck, this isn't a terrible way to go about it. Having Uncaged Fury on this guy is pretty scary as well. But it definitely needs to be in the right kind of a deck. Ones that I'm typically not too happy building and playing in limited, especially sealed. But I imagine there are very good hyper aggressive draft decks that will play this and the other very cheap red creatures here. So that is our last red card. We're almost done. 2 videos to go. We have the green cards coming up later this week and the gold artifact and lands following that one very quickly, just in time for the pre-release. So definitely let me know down in the comments, what are you excited to open? Is there a rare out there that you're just dying to play with? Draft it, build around it, whatever. Did I get a card completely wrong? Is Unchained Berserker actually the best card in the set? It's not, but you can have your opinion. Definitely let me know down in the comments whether or not I'm right or wrong about certain cards. And let's get that dialogue going as always. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for plenty more shenanigans, me ranting and rambling about Magic cards late into the evening, deprived of sleep and quite hungry. But once again, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll be back later this week with more EOT Newsflash. Have a great night.